Nobody expects the Sith Inquisition. Welcome back to the Rebels Recap, right here on Positively Nerdy. This time around, we're discussing the 4th episode of Season 1, Rise of the Old Masters. And this is it, the one you've been waiting for. We've got lightsabers, we've got giant aliens, we've got stormtroopers, we've got Jedi mind tricks, we've got no fruit anywhere. But first, Disney re-released the premiere episode of Star Wars Rebels, Spark of Rebellion, on ABC Network this past Sunday, with an extra bonus scene featuring none other than the Dark Lord of the Sith himself, Darth Vader. A brief scene as Vader, on hologram, gave the Inquisitor his marching orders, apparently coming right from the Emperor himself. It was a short scene, but interesting. They're going after the kids more than the adults, which I thought was interesting. Maybe the kids make easier target. Or maybe it's a great callback to Star Wars The Clone Wars and Palpatine using a holocron to track down Force-sensitive children. It's a pretty dark side move to be going after kids. Speaking of Clone Wars, we did see Vader very briefly in a quick flash on the Mortis trilogy from Season 3, if you remember that, of Darth Vader, kind of Anakin having flash-forward visions of the future, hallucinations, whatever you want to call them. But this was kind of, well, it wasn't full-on Vader, but it was a lot closer to a full-on Vader, and it was really cool seeing him in animated form, but it was even better hearing him, because James Earl Jones actually returned to the role of Darth Vader for this brief 5 or 6 lines, whatever it was. And he didn't quite sound like he used to, but how do you complain about James Earl Jones coming back to voice Darth Vader? You can't. The timing of the re-release was pretty appropriate, as this week's episode featured the full-on debut of the Inquisitor and was a very Star Warsian episode, great for anybody who caught the premiere on ABC and wasn't aware of the show beforehand. The episode opens with Kanan training Ezra on top of the ghosts that are actually flying up in the air. Zeb and Chopper are there also, but they're more there to kind of make fun of Ezra, quite honestly. And it's pretty clear that Kanan is struggling with teaching Ezra, but we're not sure if it's Ezra that he's struggling with, or just teaching in general. After a little mishap with the training, Sabine brings them all inside so they can watch the HoloNet feed of the events of the last episode and kind of the Empire spin on it, which I thought was a great, subtle little thing to show kind of the propaganda of the Empire. Anyway, they also receive a secret message during that lets them know that Jedi Master Luminara is actually still alive. She's being held captive by the Empire. She's actually being held in a prison facility known as the Spire, which we got to see recently in the Darth Maul comic from Dark Horse. The Spire is a prison that's supposed to be impossible to break into, so immediately the crew of the Ghost decides they're going to break into it, and surprisingly enough they do. Before that, though, we actually get to see the shuttle of the Ghost, and the crew's all coming down in the shuttle, and you got the red light on, and they're all kind of getting ready. All I really needed to make that scene perfect was Little Richard and Jesse Ventura. Kanan and Ezra do make it to Luminara's cell, but surprise, surprise, it's a trap. The Empire is actually using Luminara's remains to trick not only Kanan this time, but other Jedi in the past, at least based on the Inquisitor's dialogue. That's the impression I got. And it's a pretty brilliant, if extremely brutal method. Obviously, the Empire is very desperate, especially Emperor and Vader, to hunt down remaining Jedi, and this is the tactic they've decided to use, and it's a little bit nuts, but I thought it was kind of fascinating all at the same time, and a great, if disturbing, little bit to have in a Star Wars show. And this finally leads us to the debut of the Inquisitor, voiced brilliantly, I might add, by Jason Isaacs. He had a great entrance, a great kind of debut, a walk-in, nothing like Vader at the beginning of episode 4, but what are you going to do? He's cocky, he's condescending, and he's more than capable. Right away, a great Star Wars villain. But at the same time, he's another Sith, or at least a Sith wannabe, toting a lightsaber around. How many of these guys do we need? Now, don't get me wrong, I understand exactly why they did it. You need an enemy that we don't know the outcome of. An enemy that could be defeated. An enemy that might stick around. An enemy that has question marks. Star Wars The Clone Wars, as much as I loved it, suffered a little bit by having Count Dooku and General Grievous as their main antagonists. And you knew all along what was going to end. Nothing was going to happen to them. They were going to end up in Episode 3 and die the way they were supposed to in Episode 3 and not in The Clone Wars. Having the Inquisitor allows us to kind of have that element of surprise without using the Emperor and Vader, whose fates we also already know. So I'm kind of torn on the fact that Vader and Emperor are using this guy, because it doesn't really line up with what I think of in terms of Star Wars and Sith, but he's a really interesting character, and I can tell from this episode that he's a really interesting character already, and I like the question marks that come with him. So I'm a little bit conflicted, but I'm leaning toward I'm just going to accept it and like him and move on. But is he a full-on Sith? I don't think so. We do have the clip from the ABC rebroadcast of Spark of Rebellion where Vader says to the Inquisitor, "These are my master's orders." But he doesn't really say, "These are my master's orders to you." Now maybe I'm implying too much, but I have a feeling that maybe the Inquisitor is Vader's dirty little secret. Or at least that's what I'd kind of like to think of him as. And he's not a full-on Sith, and he's got a really bizarre lightsaber, which if you watch the Rebels Recon on StarWars.com, you'll hear executive producer Dave Filoni say that the reason that lightsaber does all the things it does is to compensate for his lack of ability. Also a great running gag in the episode with Ezra and Zeb as far as the abilities of the Inquisitor's lightsaber. Although the Inquisitor looked more than capable to me. Now, this episode was written by Henry Gilroy, and I haven't mentioned that before because I haven't really felt the need the way I do here to say this guy was clearly under some sort of bet to fit in every Star Wars dialogue reference he possibly could. We have the running gag of "there is no try," which actually turns into more philosophical and inspirational than the running gag, but it plays both, and they say "there is no try" quite a few times. Kanan drops a "nice and quiet-like" line on us, as well as a "you're lucky every stormtrooper in the prison doesn't know we're here." We all know where that came from. Sabine tells Zeb this plan is getting worse all the time, which was actually really funny because, well, one, it's the callback obviously to Empire, but it's also Kanan's plan, and they're saying it and complaining about it right in front of Kanan, which I found funny. And of course the line of "it's a trap." But to be honest, it was really subtle and underscored, and they didn't play it for the big laugh. It was a trap. So it's a pretty exciting episode, right? But who's missing? Talked about Sabine, talked about Zeb, talked about Ezra, talked about Kanan, we even talked about Chopper. Who's missing? Hera, where are you? Oh, that's right, you're sitting in the shuttle outside of the prison just waiting while everything goes to hell on the inside. You're the Argyle of Star Wars Rebels. So I think Rise of the Old Masters might have been my favorite episode of Star Wars Rebels so far. Yes, it's only the 4th episode, but I really like Spark of Rebellion, especially as a premiere. But I think Rise of the Old Masters really gave us those classic Star Wars themes, as well as propelling the characters and the series as a whole forward in a big, big way. So we'll see what the future holds for the Inquisitor, and Kanan, for that matter. But wherever it goes, I know I'm going to enjoy the ride. So there you have it, Rebels. Don't forget to tell me all about what you thought of this episode. And to check out my podcast and all other things Positively Nerdy, you can head on over to positivelynerdy.com or find me on Facebook and Twitter. And until next time, Rebels, celebrate your fandom.